everyone, and thanks very much for joining us tonight. On behalf of the American Schooner Association and the Great Chesapeake Bay Schooner Race, I'd like to welcome you to this presentation by John Eginton. John has long been a great supporter of ours and a mainstay of our organizations, and I couldn't be more pleased to have him here tonight. So without any further ado, let's switch over to John. Hey, John.
Thank you very much. My schooner career began in 1976 on the schooner Victory Chimes out of Rockland, Maine. And of course, at the time, I had no idea it would become a career, but the rest was just a failure to do anything else. I'd spent much of 6 seasons on board the Victory Chimes, fishing in 1981 as first mate. In this picture on the right, we have Captain Frederick B. Guild, who owned the Victory Chimes for 30 years. And in the back, in the middle, we have second mate Jim Guile, who just retired last year after 35 years as the captain of the schooner Tabor Boy out of Marion, Massachusetts. And in fact, Captain Guile just published a book called Sailing a North Sea Pilot Schooner by Captain James E. Guile. And I'm looking forward to getting my copy. And on the left, we have me at the wheel. Yeah, I'd heard great things about the Caribbean and I wanted to check it out. So I was hired on the schooner Voyager out of St. Martin, which was the opposite end of the social spectrum from the Victory Chimes. On the Victory Chimes, you never sat down. On Voyager, we steered while sitting in a director's chair. But the Caribbean was grand. And let me just fiddle here. There we have St. Kitts in the background there. It was a great experience for me, and I stayed aboard for the summer season. We had a very fast transit from St. Martin up to Mystic, where I arrived. Here we have Voyager on the left, the schooner that brought me to Mystic, and I was mate on her that year. In the middle, we have the 1886 Delaware Bay oyster schooner Charlotte Ann, which the following year would become my first command. And on the right, closest to the drawbridge, we have the Pursuit of Happiness, which was a 15-year in-the-water rebuilding project. And the fellow who was undertaking it died before it was ever finished. And I heard that Pursuit of Happiness went to Maine, but I've lost track of what happened to it after that. But it was a great learning experience for me being made on Voyager. And at the end of that year, Captain Armin L. Sasser hired me as second mate on the Pride of Baltimore for what was then the most ambitious voyage Pride had ever undertaken, 6 months from Baltimore to San Francisco by way of the Panama Canal. And this picture was taken on Halloween, the day we left Baltimore's inner harbor and set sail on this great odyssey. And an odyssey it was. At the end of that trip, we were in San Francisco Bay, and I had never seen Pride of Baltimore under sail in the 6 months that I was on her. Of course, I had no vantage, but afterwards I was working for the Blue and Gold Fleet in San Francisco and had the opportunity to take this picture of Pride out sailing about a week after I got off. And it was breathtaking for me to see her under sail. After I got off Pride, I came back to Mystic and took my first command. As I mentioned, it was the Charlotte Ann. And that was a great learning experience. This picture was taken in the fall. We relocated to Newport, Rhode Island, and we were doing day sails covering the America's Cup races. What we did not know would be the last America's Cup races held out of Newport. On the right in this picture in the red shirt with his back to us is James Patterson, who would become a legend in the schooner trade and sailed on so many schooners. This was James' first schooner, and that was his first summer. On the left, sitting on the housetop in the blue sweater, is the late Armin L. Sasser. Charlotte Ann had been Armin's first command, as it was mine. And Armin stopped by that day to visit us and go out for a sail with us. And it was just over 2 years after this picture was taken that Armin was lost with 3 others when Pride Baltimore was lost. At the end of this Newport adventure, James and I delivered the Charlotte Ann to Fort Lauderdale, where it was sold, and it never came back to Mystic. It went to Chicago after that and has since been broken up. And so needing a job and loving what I was doing, I applied to the other schooner in town, the Mystic Whaler. And here's launching day shot of the Mystic Whaler in Tarpon Springs, Florida, at George Sutton's yard on the Anclote River. And this is January of 1967, 4 days before a football game that would later be renamed Super Bowl I. And the two brothers who commissioned the schooner to be built were PJ and Charlie Matthews, and they were Orthodox Greeks. So we had an Orthodox Greek priest bless the schooner at the launching ceremony. In this photograph on the left in the light overcoat, that's Charlie Matthews, who I never met. He died in 1976. His brother, PJ, is all the way on the right with his back to us. And it was PJ who hired me in 1984 as captain of the Mystic Whaler. And boy, he didn't know what he was getting into. The Mystic Whaler did a variety of cruises out in New England. They also had 2 winters in the Caribbean, and that is Virgin Gorda in the background. And although they gave up the Caribbean after 1969, they kept using this photograph in all their marketing for years and years afterwards. There's a postcard from Sag Harbor advertising the Hamptons. Let me see if I can enlarge this a little bit.
Hey, John, can you hold on
Yeah.
a second? Ladies and gentlemen, if you would like to enter questions, at the bottom of your screens, there should be a Q&A box. You can click, type your questions, and they'll accumulate till John's finished. I just got a note that someone is not able to hear you. Is there anyone else who cannot hear? Please type in your chat box. Hear him fine, can't hear him? Looks like everybody's doing okay.
I can hear me.
Okay, well, I'm glad. Okay, thank you very much, John. Let's carry on.
Okay, and this postcard taken from Sag Harbor, probably about 1982. That is Captain Quentin Snedeker at the helm of the Mystic Whaler. He was captain of the Mystic Whaler for 11 years. And we had a swarthy crew on board my first year. I think I still look like that too. After 4 years on the Mystic Whaler, I transferred to the Mystic Clipper. And the Mystic Clipper was a joy to sail. And for 6 years, I was captain of the Mystic Clipper, also out of Mystic. And she gave us many a rewarding experience. The whole time I had been on the Mystic Whaler, the vessel was not well maintained, and the Coast Guard had issued frequent warnings to PJ that the maintenance needed to be improved, but we were never kept on payroll other than when we were sailing to do the work that was needed. One more shot of the Mystic Clipper in front of World Trade Center towers there. Back to the Mystic Whaler. In 1990, when the Mystic Whaler hauled out, the Coast Guard condemned the vessel. And basically, it was a long time in coming. The warnings had been there, but Mystic Whaler needed a whole new bottom. And to facilitate that work, most of the interior would have to be removed along with the plumbing and the wiring, which was no great loss at that point. PJ committed himself to rebuilding the vessel, but after 2 years, the yard bills had gotten way ahead of the payments, and the yard shut the program down. We didn't know when we hauled out in 1990 that the Mystic Whaler would be out of the water for over 5 years and would never go back in the water under PJ's ownership again. But finally, after 4 years, PJ announced his intention to sign the Mystic Whaler over to the yard in Rhode Island and walk away from it. And then PJ died without ever actually having done that. The yard was stuck with a derelict vessel on their hands, a large one at that. They knew that I had no money, but if I had the opportunity to raise the money, that I would be a pretty good candidate to take on the Mystic Whaler. And so we came to an agreement. And I went out and started raising money. We had this ingeniously simple idea that could not work. We wrote to friends and asked them to give us unsecured loans. And it did work. We got enough together that Bank of America came in with the rest of the capital we would need to get going. And in January of 1995, it was all systems go, except for one delay. Bank of America would not release the money until the yard could prove that they had owned the vessel that they had just sold me. And they could not, because PJ never signed the boat over to them. And PJ was no longer alive. PJ's widow balked at signing the hull over to the yard, and there were legal delays there until she was finally persuaded that she had no benefit to derive from continuing to own the hull. So she signed the boat over. We lost almost 3 months in legal delays, and we were in a hurry to get going. We were out of time, and we had a great deal of work to do. So we were working on the vessel, notwithstanding the fact that we didn't own it and we were not insured. This was the engine room before we ripped the last of the old wiring out, and we're looking up to daylight there, up into the old galley. We worked in a hurry to button everything up and get the vessel launchable. This was the engine room looking down now, when we're all sandblasted, painted, and all the welding was done, and ready to lower the engine in. This was the great room. This is the great room as it looked when it was finished. This was the great room we started with. Still a bit of daylight there to button up. And this was the galley. This is the galley as it wound up. Bear with me. And here we are in the galley with all the welding done, the sandblasting done, painting done, cleaning up, and getting ready to install it. But this was the galley we had started with when we took it all on. But we were in a mad rush. We had some wonderful folks coming to help us out. We had a great crew hired, and everybody went to it with a will. And working like mad. We're at ProMet in Providence here now. Lots of details to attend to, lots to keep track of. We should get an engine in there, I guess. Yeah, propeller too, that would be good. We'll get that on. Rewiring the vessel, and wiring and wiring and wiring. One of our many dear friends and volunteers was Bruce Adams, who lived outside Rochester, New York. And every Friday afternoon, he would get out of work and drive 6 hours to Providence, spend the weekend volunteering on the Mystic Whaler. On Monday, he would call out sick, and then Monday night, he would drive 6 hours back home. There wasn't anything we could find that Bruce couldn't build. Here he was building a refrigerator in the galley. People would stop by and say, "What are you doing?" He said, "I'm building a refrigerator." There'd be applause, and each person would say, "You can't build a refrigerator out of plywood." Well, we did, and it's still there. And Bruce, the mason, built the brick dry works. And he built the great room head. By now, Bruce is starting to look a little bit tired in this photograph. We started laying down the new deck. And that's all. It's a steel deck underneath the clear vertical grain Douglas fir there going down. And we're all camping on board. Finally, we got to the point where we were ready to launch the hull. We weren't ready to do anything else, but finally we got Mystic Whaler into the water with the engine in. And we headed back, we got underway under our own power and headed back for Mystic. But I was determined when Mystic Whaler went up the Mystic River for the first time in 6 years that she would not be the floating shanty that she obviously was in this picture. And so I arranged with Wes Maxwell to hide out at his yard at the mouth of the Mystic River for a week. And here we are on our way home. We got to Noank on a Saturday morning, 1 week before our first cruise. We had an issue with the black seam compound on the quarterdeck. It's a 2-part thiacol mixture that we must have mixed wrong because it's supposed to be dry in 4 days and completely cured in 2 weeks. This is now 3 weeks later, and the black steam compound was completely liquid. And we had to have separate pairs of shoes to walk on the quarterdeck and walk everywhere else. Meanwhile, we had a Coast Guard inspection on Tuesday, but before that, we had an FCC inspection on Monday to inspect our electronics. We had no electronics, and we had no compass. The one that's in this picture is a very rare 7-inch constellation. The compass fluid was fogged, the dome was cracked, and the pivot point was chipped so that the compass would not turn. You're always going in the same direction. Clearly, that wasn't going to pass inspection. George Winters, our local compass adjuster, had been looking for a 7-inch constellation dome to replace that with. And he'd been looking for a long time. They hadn't been made in 30 years. And so Saturday morning when we got in, George came down and collected the compass from us. And I said, George, see what you can do, or we're going to have to talk about terms on a new compass because we're out of time here. Monday morning, George came back with a compass looking just like new. It was amazing. You could see it in this picture forward of the little girl's hat there. And I said, George, how did you do that? And he said, well, about 3 years ago, there was a compass adjuster in Florida who retired, and he put his inventory up for sale. And I went down there, and he had 2 7-inch constellation domes. And he said, I'd better pick those up just in case the Mystic Whaler ever gets back into the water. And so we got a newly rebuilt compass out of it. On Sunday afternoon, Fred Wilson from Dockside Electronics came and installed all the electronics on the Mystic Whaler. On Monday, the FCC inspector came, inspected the electronics, wrote us out a safety certificate, FCC. On Tuesday, Coast Guard came. Dave Radacci was the inspector. At this point, we had only half the bunks built down below. No ladders to get down below yet in most places. And it was a shambles. And the inspector just looked around the vessel and he said, John, you're going sailing when? And I said, Saturday. And he said, John, you're never going to make it. And I said, I know what you're saying, Dave, and I understand. But I've been here every day, and we'd start work at 6 in the morning and promised ourselves that we would knock off by midnight. And we never did. But, I said, at the end of each day, it's been a whole different schooner than it was that morning. We had 17 people between crew and volunteers working on board during that time. And Dave said, well, Thursday is the last day I can come by, just 2 days from now. And I said, fair enough. That's all I can ask. Thank you. So Thursday, Coast Guard inspector came back and he said, after he looked around, he said, this is an entirely different vessel than the one I was on 2 days ago. And he wrote us out a certificate to carry passengers for hire, and we were ready to get into business. There was nothing varnished on the schooner. Everything was painted. You can see it hadn't been painted yet, but it was either painted tan or painted red. And when we were ready for our first cruise, all the paint was still wet. The quarterdeck seam compound still hadn't cured. So the night before the first cruise, I went to Home Depot, bought a bunch of brown AstroTurf and a bunch of Monel staples. And we stapled AstroTurf down to the entire quarterdeck. And that's how we went sailing that first season. Of course, the next winter when we went to tear it up, by then the thiacol had cured and the AstroTurf wouldn't come up. But Saturday morning, a week after we arrived in Noank, we're boarding passengers, family, friends, the bankers, lenders, and wind conditions were ideal. It was a southeast breeze, the perfect direction for wind direction for sailing up the Mystic River. So we got underway, we set sail, and we were able to sail all the way up the river and up through the drawbridge on our triumphant homecoming. Coming through the drawbridge there and heading up towards Mystic Seaport. Our triumphant return home was covered live by WBMW radio. They had the DJs on the dock welcoming us home. You can tell this is the real deal. They've got a telephone there on the dock. And then we were off and sailing. And over the many years, the sailing has been wonderful. But what's been most rewarding have been the people that we got to meet along the way, the crew and passengers alike. Our lives have been enriched by all the people the Mystic Whaler brought to us, and we'll be forever grateful. Got to do a lot of interesting things as well. Hosting American Schooner Association rendezvous at Block Island and at Greenport. We also got to spend 24 spring seasons on the Hudson River, working with the Clearwater organization, doing environmental education sales. And that was a tremendous experience. Here we are sailing off Breakneck Ridge with a group of fourth graders on board. Lots of special moments during the Hudson River seasons. This is a musical moment under sail. One of those moments I just had to pinch myself, said, I can't believe I get to be here for this. But all jamming together. Starting from the left, we have David Amram and Rafi, Pete Seeger in the white hat. In the lavender behind the fourth sheet is Peter Yarrow, then Guy Davis and Tom Chapin on the right. Another rewarding experience we had was getting to support the Charles W. Morgan on her 38th voyage. And we provided berthing and meals for all the Charles W. Morgan crew while we were up in Stellwagen Bay, in Cape Cod Bay, and got to sail in company with the Morgan and see whales on Stellwagen banks. That was a great experience. Another great highlight was the 15 years that we participated in the Great Chesapeake Bay Schooner Race and met some wonderful people along the way. Here we are at the start of the race, Pride of Baltimore 2, all the way on the right. On the left, my former command, the Mystic Clippers, now the Liberty Clipper out of Boston. Charging down the bay on a broad reach, Mystic Whaler and Lady Maryland, both of us with reefs, single reefs tucked in our main. Captain Jesse Briggs took this picture of the Mystic Whaler from the A.J. Meerwald. Also enjoyed being able to participate in education programs everywhere. This particular one, Pat, is teaching navigation in Portsmouth, Virginia at the end of the schooner race. Another one of our favorite events is the Cambridge Schooner Rendezvous. And here we are in Cambridge, Maryland, docked across from the skipjack, Nathan of Dorchester. We absolutely loved everything we did on the Mystic Whaler, well, most of it. And we certainly never wanted it to end, but we knew we weren't getting any younger, and we knew we would not be able to do it forever. So 4 years ago, we put the Mystic Whaler on the market. And only by doing that could we ensure that the schooner would have a future, because we knew that we could not be it. And it came through last fall, after all our many enriching experiences sailing together. But the offer came through rather quickly, and the whole deal went down surprisingly quickly. But here we are in October, the Mystic Whaler passing through the drawbridge for the last time. We delivered Mystic Whaler to Fort Lauderdale, where it was loaded onto a ship and taken to the Channel Islands in California, where it is now under the name of the Mystic Cruiser. And here's a background we never thought we would see: the Mystic Whaler sailing into Channel, I believe that's Santa Barbara, actually, in California, on her way to her new home. This was taken about 2 months ago. So one last photograph. This one's taken in Cold Spring, New York, on the Hudson River in the early morning, looking across at Storm King Mountain. And for the 38 years that I was captain of the Mystic Whaler, for the 27 years that it was our business, we never, ever dreamt that we would work so hard and know such financial anxiety and feel so lucky to be doing what we were doing. Thank you.
Well, I got to tell you, John, you got a lot of us in tears right now. That was wonderful. Thank you so much.
Oh, pollen is terrible, isn't it?
Pollen's terrible. Well, luckily we're a pollen nation. It's all good. And ladies and gentlemen, if you do have any questions that you would like to ask John, this is your chance. There's a Q&A box at the bottom of your Zoom screen, and just type away. I see Pat is saying so many wonderful memories, and I completely agree with that. As someone who's actually participated in the Chesapeake Bay Schooner race for more than 20 years, having you guys bow out was a huge loss on our part. I will tell you. It really was. Hit your stop sharing, my friend, and we will get you back on for a second or two. There you go. And right now, if any of you are curious about who we are and what we do, we, of course, are the Great Chesapeake Bay Schooner Race, and we are the American Schooner Association. So in perfect land, you should be seeing our stuff there. And let's see what we got in Q&A. We got a question coming up here, John. And the question is from Stephen, who says, what are you doing in the future?
Good question. Right now, we are at home in Centerville, Maryland, on the Eastern Shore, and trying to figure out what the next chapter will be. Right now, the chapter is home restoration. But
sorry.
I'm not done yet, so I don't know what the next chapter is, but I'd like to obviously stay underway and be able to provide a service to people. So we'll see.
Don't worry, I'll try and find something for you to do. John, are you able to do that?
Ship's name in California is not my choice. It is Mystic Cruzar, Cruzar.
Oh, what a frightening thought. Are you, John, are you able to see the Q&A, the questions running along?
I am,
okay.
As far as I know.
It looks like William Davies has sent one in.
I'm looking at Wendy.
Oh, you're ahead of me.
When did Wendy? I started on the Mystic Whaler in 1984, which was the first year Mystic Whaler did not go to the Chesapeake Bay, and she did not come back until 2001. That's right.
Yeah, pretty cool.
Well,
you say question from William Davies there?
Yeah, Duncan, why don't you go ahead and read them since you're seeing them in a different order than I am.
William asks, so what were some of the more challenging aspects of running a schooner-based business? Any advice for someone thinking of doing the same?
Be well capitalized. The greatest anxiety I knew, and it happened more than once, it was in January, knowing that I could not pay the mortgage and wondering how we were going to keep it going. There were, the winters are lonely when and you're a seasonal operation. One thing banks dislike more than a seasonal business is one that can sink. And so we were very fortunate to get Bank of America to come in behind us on that. But yeah, as I say, we've been very enriched by the many people the Mystic Whaler brought into our lives, and especially the crew, who were always our family, which is not to say that we always enjoyed being an employer.
Totally get that. Greg Dukowski, I actually had lunch with him about 3 days ago.
Hi, Greg.
Hey there. He says, Centerville, exclamation point. I'm living in Rock Hall now. We should get together for a few beverages. Greg, I'm not sure that was a question.
What do you have?
What do you got there? It's all good, man. Let's see. Oh, I see. Wendy is typed in the comments, and I'm looking at the Q&A. So we'll have to keep an eye on both of those. Yeah, very good. All right, my friends, we have made it all the way to 7:30. What a concept. And it's been an excellent time. Are there any more questions you'd like to send in, please? Great. Hi, Brenda. Brenda Reed is online there.
There was one other question. Are you a young crew coming up to do what we did? And the answer is yes. The Tall Ships America organization has a page called the Billet Bank, where they list job openings on commercial and not-for-profit tall ships. And there is always a tremendous demand for crew. I saw the schooners Woodwind out of Annapolis are advertising for crew as well. So there are tremendous opportunities out there for entry-level crew. Experience is not required. You'll get the training on the job. And so the opportunity is there.
That's the truth. Got a couple more questions, Sean. Renee asks, hey, Cap, any thoughts about becoming Santa?
Ho, ho, ho.
And Greg wants to know when you're getting another boat. Oh, my God.
Got one, thank you.
Yeah. And Robin says, hey, what made you choose Victory Chimes?
When I was 12 years old, I had the opportunity to spend some time on Whitehead Island off the coast of Maine with a crew of kids. We were helping to restore an old life-saving station on Whitehead. And one foggy day, I looked out, I heard a commotion on the water of a vessel moving, but I didn't hear an engine. And I heard voices. And I looked out, wondering what it was. And then there was a break in the fog, and into that break sailed the three-masted schooner Victory Chimes.
How cool is that?
I was so transfixed. I just knew I had to get on that. And 7 years later, I was hired.
That is, what a wonderful story. And you scratch the surface of a lot of these captains, and they've got similar stories like that. So it's going to be pretty exciting.
Yeah, if anyone's around Mystic or have the opportunity to get to Mystic Seaport Museum, the Victory Chimes is dry docked at the shipyard at Mystic Seaport right now for their annual inspection. And if you have not seen the Victory Chimes out of the water, her bottom is surprising.
How so is that? You mean how foul it is?
No, how flat it is.
Oh, how flat it is.
Victory Chimes is the opposite of Dead Rise.
Maybe she could be called the Victory Chimes.
Mm-hmm.
I like it. All right, everybody. And before we hang off, I want to thank you all very much for coming. And keep an eye out on your emails. We're going to have a number of very interesting people. And we got Matt Rutherford lined up for us. And we're going to be talking to Will Gates, who is the captain of the Maryland Dove. So we've got some really interesting things coming on. And John, on behalf of the Great Chesapeake Bay Schooner Race and the American Schooner Association, I want to thank you very much, first of all, for your career, and now for this great presentation. Thank you.
Well, thank you all.
Thanks, everybody, for coming. I hope you've had a good time. And of course, you can always visit the website, and you can always send me an email. Thanks, everyone. Good night, John.
Good night, all.
Good night, John Boy.